All right, so first thing I want to talk about, maybe some of you have already heard this, but for those of you who haven't, Lustre.org is now, thanks to an agreement with Seagate, owned collectively between EOFS and OpenSFS. So the Lustre.org website, the entire domain, is now managed by the community. One of the very nice benefits of this is that the major mailing lists on Lustre.org are under our control, and we want everyone to come back to those mailing lists and start using them again. Everyone who's interested in Lustre should sign up for the Lustre Announce list. It's a very low traffic list. You'll get information about major Lustre updates, major conferences like LAD and LUG. The next level, a little bit more traffic, Lustre Discuss. So any administrators, developers, managers, anyone who wants to set up a file system, talk about how to configure it, how to operate a Lustre file system, Lustre Discuss, that's the place to sign up. Then the next level, even less traffic, but anyone involved with Lustre development should sign up for the Lustre Development mailing list at lustre.org. Here is where we're going to discuss the actual Lustre software development. Next, I want to talk a little about the release schedule. So in the previous talk, you heard about community releases, and this is basically what she was talking about here. Every 6 months, currently, is our plan, is to put out a major release of Lustre. It's all developed along one major public branch of development called master. The releases in the past, those are actual dates. Releases in the future are target dates and not guaranteed to be the specific date when things are released. One of the major things that people have been asking me over the past year is, what happened to maintenance releases? Or when is the next maintenance release coming out? And essentially the answer is, it's not. So in the past, we showed you a slide like this, which maybe confused the issue a little bit, because we've got these tiny little symbols here that maybe people didn't focus on quite enough. The symbol on the bottom, that has both OpenSFS and Intel. So that major release that's the master branch essentially. All of the other branches that came off of the master branch were entirely funded by Intel and mainly funded by support contracts and Intel's own customers. Intel's decided to take those maintenance branches private and make them private customer branches, and all of the releases on those branches are private as well. So now we just have one major public branch that we're all working on. The major releases along that branch will just be 2.6.0, 2.8.0, and so on. The third digit, currently we don't have any plans to put out any releases that will increment that third digit. So a review of the past releases for people who haven't been following along in the past. Lustre 2.6.0, we had LFSCK Phase 2. That was MDT and OST consistency checking. That's the Lustre file system checker. That's a checker that operates on the Lustre file system level, the FSCK that you know about, LDiskFS level, that has to be run at the lower level on every single node. LFSCK is coordinated across all the MDTs and OSTs at the file system level. Next, it did client single-threaded performance improvements and the initial technology preview of striped directories. 2.7, we had more LFSCK work there. We had dynamic LNet configuration, fine-grained OST placement, UID, GID mapping, some of the early work there. And we had striped directories again, technology preview continued. Lustre 2.8, initially we were targeting the end of September. Like I mentioned earlier, these are targets, not guaranteed release dates, and it looks like at this point that is going to slip a bit. We're planning sometime in October the release will come out. There's a pretty major release because D&E Phase 2, async commit and recovery. So D&E is distributed namespace. That's clustered metadata is kind of another name for it. We got parallel MDS servers now. This is the completion of both earlier work. In earlier releases of Lustre, you could have remote directories. So different directories could appear on different MDS servers. With the completion of the D&E work, now directories can be also striped across multiple metadata servers. So you should be able to put a whole lot of files in one directory and scale the performance because that directory is served by multiple metadata servers. LFSCK Phase 4, the final phase of the Lustre file system checker has been completed. That was just performance tuning work. We also have a nice new feature, multiple modify RPCs per client. There'll be a talk later in this conference about that, but that's really nice because in the past, we could only have a single metadata change outstanding with a server at a time from each client. So if you have one client doing a lot of metadata changes, they're all sequentialized from that client. Now you can have multiple in flight. We also have RHEL 7 support and the beginning of SE Linux client support. So that release is going to be coming out next month. What's going to be coming out after that? Well, some of the developments underway. We have more UID, GID mapping work. We've got shared key crypto, lock ahead, Kerberos revival, and NRS delay policy. That's a network request scheduler, and that's mainly for giving us a way to do some injection of faults for testing purposes. Will all these appear in 2.9? We don't know yet. Depends how well the development comes along in this process. If they're ready in time, they'll go in. Some of these things we had targeted for 2.8. We'd hoped they'd go into 2.8, but we didn't have enough reviewers to actually get everything reviewed and landed in time. So some of those things that missed the 2.8 window are likely to land under 2.9 because they're pretty well ready to go. One of the things I want to bring to people's attention is the URL at the bottom. Maybe not all of you can see, but you can go look it up later. It's pretty simple, wiki.lustre.org/projects. So you go to projects page on the wiki. That's a place where we need everyone to go and tell us what projects you're working on for Lustre and tell us what time frame you intend to land them, because that's the best way we're going to have for everyone to coordinate their efforts. With 2.8, we had the multiple modify RPCs and D&E. Those things, the code interacted in some ways, and partially why this release is going to be a little late is there was a lot of work to coordinate and resolve conflicts between those two projects. Best way we're going to know about upcoming conflicts and coordinate our efforts is if we all communicate and tell each other which projects we're working on. So if you have a project, a major project that you plan to get into Lustre, go update that page, tell us what time frame you want to get it done in, so we can all talk about what we need to get things landed in a reasonable length of time. Next, I'm going to give you some information about the 2.8 release, which isn't out yet, so these are pre-2.8 statistics. If you want to know exactly what version I checked for these to generate these numbers, you can see the commit number and the date there. So here's the number of commits per Lustre release over time. We've got Lustre 2.1 on the left all the way up to Lustre pre-2.8 on the right there. Next, we've got the lines of code change per release. Again, Lustre 2.1 to pre-2.8. 2.4 was actually quite a bit there. 2.8, not too bad so far. There's going to be some more changes, but I don't think, at this point, we've got vast majority of the change done, and we're just trying to bug fix and stabilize the release. This is the number of commit authors per Lustre release, again, from 2.1 up to pre-2.8. And it seems to have settled out a bit. Although I would point out that in pre-2.8, maybe 6 or 7 author names are now people that came from the Upstream kernel. And this is a change from previous releases. I hadn't really seen this before, but now that we're trying to push the client to the Upstream kernel, there's some work that needs to be done to keep our personal version of Lustre client updated with the code that's upstream. The Upstream kernel has had some people not normally involved with Lustre committing bug fix, not much in the bug fix area, mostly in simple cleanup, but some of those patches now have been backported back into the Lustre master branch, so we have some new authors appearing that aren't really Lustre authors, but so that skews the number up a little bit more than it has in the past. Speaking of the Upstream kernel, so work continues there. We've been working on it for maybe 2 years now. If you're not familiar with it, there's work to get the client portion of Lustre into the Upstream Linux kernel. Right now, and for quite some time, it's been stuck in this area called staging, where it's kind of an intermediate mode where it's almost in the kernel but not quite. And we have to get it cleaned up and ready before they'll accept it into Lustre proper. Earlier this year, there was a little kerfuffle and some threats from the Upstream guys that not enough progress was being made, and they threatened to kick us out. But fortunately, the community came together and got enough work done and is continuing to do enough work to have satisfied them. So we're still in the kernel staging area and still working to get out. Oleg is one of the main guys leading that. James Simmons has certainly done a lot of effort there. We have Mike Shuey from Purdue is a new guy getting involved, and Ben Evans from Cray. I'm sure there's other names that I'm missing as well, but we're trying to get, certainly Oleg and James have done, I think, the bulk of the work there and could certainly use a lot more work. And that's going to be an ongoing effort that really needs to be maintained for years into the future, because we're going to have to keep, even once we get Lustre out of the staging area, we're going to have to now keep these two branches, Upstream in the kernel and our personal master branch, in sync for years, likely, until Lustre client in the kernel is ubiquitous enough, has made it into all the Lustre Linux distributions, that we no longer need to maintain our own version of the client. But that's probably years in the future, so a lot of work there we need help with. Some more pre-2.8 release statistics. Here we get into the pretty pie charts. So developers per organization. These are people that, this isn't, I didn't talk to the organization and say, how many developers do you have? This is people that either authored or did a final review on a patch that made it into the tree in the pre-2.8 time frame. So we've got Intel had 34 people, Seagate 16, Cray 9, others 7, and like I said, of the other group, in the past I tried to put exactly all the organizations, but now we have some names from Upstream that aren't in organizations we know about from the Linux kernel. I just leave anyone organization I don't recognize as a normal Lustre contributor under the other group. And so on down the line. Commits per organization, currently Intel authored 65% of the commits, Oak Ridge 8.4, Cray 7.3, Seagate 6.5, and so on down the line. Lines of code per organization, we have Intel with 65%, Oak Ridge with 21, Cray with about 5, Bull with 3, and so on. Now Atos. Final commit reviews for organization. This is the area still where we need to see the most improvement in the future. Intel did over 82% of the final reviews. And Oak Ridge 9, you can see we really need to balance that out and get other organizations getting more people doing code reviews. That takes time. New developers need to develop their expertise, their experience with Lustre before they can really get in there and do quality code reviews. So hopefully over time we'll see this percentage improve. Switching gears a little, you might have heard this at LUG. If you did, forgive me. Early in this year, we did the yearly Lustre Survey. This year, we had pretty good response. 89 people replied to the survey. Here's a chart of what versions of Lustre that those respondents said they were using in production. 2.5 had certainly overtaken the other releases. That was a nice new trend over previous polls. Hopefully numbers have skewed a little more in our favor still since earlier in the year. Linux distribution used, it was certainly dominated by RHEL in our survey, with RHEL 6 at the time. I'm guessing RHEL 7 is starting to make inroads, and we'll probably see that increase in the next poll. This slide is about the support situation. So we asked people, do you pay for Lustre support? Do you do it yourself? So the chart shows self-supported people who do not pay someone for Lustre support. That's 54% of the respondents. Only 37% had direct formal paid support relationships with an organization. And 9% of the respondents said we provide support for people who pay us to do so. For the people that are self-supported, it'd be great if you could start talking to vendors and support our Lustre vendors, because that helps them put money and effort into Lustre development. And finally, just the final call, we need you to participate. We need managers to make sure that they're making it a priority for their developers to put development into the master public branch of Lustre. A lot of times it's easy for a private organization, you do some bug fix, some change that you put just on your private branch, and you don't put the extra effort in making sure it goes upstream. Really need for managers to make sure that they say, we understand it's going to take extra time, but that's important that this change, this feature gets in the upstream branch, so over time, this is a lesser burden on us than if we had to constantly maintain it ourselves in our private branch. If you're a software developer, we really need you to do more code reviews. We need more people to get involved in reviewing other people's code. That takes a lot of time and effort, and if we don't distribute that among more organizations, it's going to be difficult for us to maintain the current level or recent levels of development that we've had in Lustre. And of course, contribute your code to the master branch. And everyone, if you're not a software developer, there's plenty of work on the Lustre.org wiki, documentation work of all levels. We have documentations for sysadmins, documentation for users, documentation for developers. Pretty much everyone can get involved on wiki.lustre.org contributing documentation of some time. We allow anyone to sign up and contribute to the wiki, so please do. And that's all I have. Thank you. Any questions? With SE-Link support, I think in 2.8, I'm not an expert on this one, but I believe we now have client-side support. It's not coordinated by the servers. Servers don't know about the SE-Link support, but we do have client-side SE-Links.
You had shown that 54% are doing self-support, and there are no further maintenance releases. So what do you expect that those people will do?
Good. So the question was, now we don't have maintenance releases and 54% of the people don't have formal support arrangements, what do we expect them to do? I think we expect that they're going to have to use the major releases. And I think one of the major focuses I've had over the past year or two is trying to make the main releases on master more stable than they have been in the past. So we're working on doing that, making the master releases more stable and more compatible than we've seen in the past. Aside from that, if you want bug fixes before the next major release comes out, you're going to have to probably talk to a support vendor or get involved in Lustre Devel and do some development work.
Okay. I'm very new to Lustre, but I noticed that the system of continuous integration, it doesn't really test much. So for example, the 2.7.0 release, it came without actually support or maybe easy way to compile it with InfiniBand support. So is there any work plan to improve the system?
I'd say yes. There's always continually work to improve it, but it's always a struggle between improving the regression system and the automated tests that we have to the point where they can run a reasonable length of time. We have enough servers to do that. So is it going to get massively better in the near future? Probably not. It's going to be a process of continual small improvement over time. Right now, all of the automated regression testing that happens when we push changes to the main review system, those servers are maintained by Intel right now. So maybe OpenSFS, EOFS, we can start standing up additional resources that would help contribute and fill in some areas where Intel doesn't have the resources. But any planning in that stage is in the very, very early stages, so I'm not making any promises about what we're going to be doing there.
Hey, Chris.
Hello.
Do you think it would be possible, and again, you know, this is just a thought, with enough community support and organization, would it be possible to have, I don't know, independent community dot releases, or recommended patch set, perhaps?
It's certainly within the realm of possibility, yes. I think we saw the slide where we saw the percentage of reviews on the master branch. Until we've got more reviewers outside of Intel doing the key review responsibility, which is really one of the biggest responsibilities we have on any public branches, is doing the reviews and make sure we only let in high quality, low defect code into our branches. Until we've got a much larger number of people outside of Intel with the expertise and putting the effort into reviews, it's going to be difficult to also do that work on numerous other side branches. Eventually, I hope that we will be able to do that, but right now, I think we're a little low on the manpower.
Okay, so this is my sneaky way of trying to underscore what you're saying with regards to participation. I mean, we really need everybody in this room to do the best they can to get involved, because I don't think any of those, you know, more than half sides want to be at the mercy of salespeople, scare tactics, you know. Buy our cool product, otherwise you're going to suffer with the .0 release. And, you know, I think that there are multiple vendors that are playing that kind of game, and it kind of makes me sick, you know.
Absolutely. I think that's a real big reason why we need more vendors doing reviews and more non-vendors doing reviews, so everyone can be a check for other organizations and keep things open and stable and avoid those kinds of shenanigans that you're implying.
Bless you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.